We all kind of
President
function in a
Biden's
particular
live
rhythm,
COVID
you know.
relief bill.
So I've
The
got
child tax
gonna have
credit
to
was
let you all go,
extended
but you
for
all can
1
say
year,
hello to
with
Reverend
benefits
Thurston
being
before you go.
prepaid on a monthly basis.
Morning,
Good
Reverend
morning.
Thurston.
Okay,
Good
lovely
morning. Have a
ladies.
great show.
I'm gonna let you all go. We're
Yeah.
up on Facebook now and everything else.
Nearly 88% of
Pastor
children will
Thurston, how you
receive
doing?
benefits between $250
I'm
and
great, Santita. How are you today?
It's
without their
great hearing
parents
your
needing to take any
voice.
additional action.
Likewise.
The
Great
White
hearing
House
your
approved
Likewise.
changing
voice.
Hope you had a
stance on
good
calls
trip.
for an
Oh, I
Israeli-Palestinian
did. You know what?
ceasefire.
I'm on my
More
way
from
to
our Sandra
D.C. My
Magani.
niece is
Call
coming out of
Israeli
high
leader
school.
Benjamin
And
Netanyahu. The
she
White
went to
House
boarding
Okay.
school there.
expressed support
You know,
for a
because
ceasefire.
Jesse,
Fellow Democrats
Jackie,
have
and
been
Johnny
pushing him
went to
to
boarding.
demand
Jesse,
one.
Jackie, and you.
Top
I'm
Yes.
I'm the only one of us who didn't go to
McConnell calls
boarding
that
school.
You're the only one.
5 minutes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're the standout.
I'm the only one, or something, whatever that is.
A new federal lawsuit says Georgia's sweeping new overhaul of
But
election laws threatens the fundamental right to
something
vote.
like
The
that.
lawsuit was filed Monday in
But
Atlanta. Republican officials
something
in
like that.
Arizona's largest county are
But
escalating their defense of their vote
yeah, here we
count
go.
in last year's
So,
election.
but
The top Republicans on the Maricopa County
but
Board
how
of
are you doing?
Supervisors blasted the Republican
All is well on my end.
county's
Good,
2020
good, good.
election vote count Monday. Board Chairman
Dylan,
Jack
could you bring
Sellers.
this down
People's ballots and
just a
money are not
teeny,
make
just a
believe.
little? Thank you
It's
so
time to be
much.
done with this
Very good.
craziness.
Last week,
There is so much
Republican
going on.
Arizona
Have
Senate
you noticed
President
how they
Karen
are
Fann sent a
demonizing
letter to Chairman
unvaccinated
Sellers
people?
accusing Maricopa County
You
officials
know,
Listen.
of deleting data. I might
okay.
cross
I
it.
mean,
The
they're like,
wildfire
I
west
heard
of
this
Los
morning on
Angeles
CNN
continues
that
to burn.
unvaccinated
Hundreds of
people are the
residents
most
remain under
are more
evacuation and
likely not to
arson
wear masks. I
suspect
said, no,
has
no,
been
no, no.
arrested.
My friends
This
who've
is
got
AP
one
News.
dose of a 2-dose shot stopped wearing the masks. Not my friends.
Yeah,
None
they
of the
felt
people.
free.
They felt free. I'm like, what are you talking about? So,
Ariana
I mean,
Grande.
because they're making
Yeah.
people who've not been vaccinated the danger to
Ariana
society.
Grande
I'm like,
is now a
you jumped to the
newlywed,
New
but
York
it's not
Yankees.
clear just how
Because all
newly
those
she's
jokers
married.
were popping with
Correct.
COVID. And they're vaccinated. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Not with real estate
Yeah.
agent Dalton
Just,
Gomez. The representative tells People magazine the couple
Raphael,
got
how you
hitched
doing,
in a
sweetie?
small
How are
and
things down
intimate
in Brazil?
wedding.
You know, we're going to
Just
be
fewer
paying
than
more
20
attention
people attended. It's unclear when the
to
wedding
what's
took
happening in the
place.
global
Grande is
south.
27, Gomez
India,
2 years
Africa,
younger. They announced their
Latin
engagement in
America, all of
December.
that.
They
You
began
know,
dating last
Stephen,
January and
Pastor
quarantined with each
Thurston,
other during the pandemic.
Brazil
I'm
is the
Oscar
blackest
Gabriel.
country outside of Africa.
AT&T and Discovery are merging.
Correct. Yes, ma'am.
You know, sure you know that.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
they have
Albert is retiring after the
they
NBA's Eastern
also
Conference Finals.
their
He ends
COVID
a
problem is
broadcast career that
twice
spans
as
nearly
deadly
60 years. I'm
as
Jackie
the
Quinn,
one that they
AP
have in India.
News.
It's all awful.
Mm.
I mean, if you can imagine that.
Yeah.
But we're
Right.
not hearing about that.
We're not hearing that.
Yeah.
Correct.
So I'm going to bring this panel that I gathered for Reverend Show on Sunday. I'm going to bring it back on here
Progressive Talk,
on the
where
Fish
Okay.
Show, so the people can know, because not sharing
Now,
these vaccine recipes. And quite frankly, I want to know about the therapeutics. Because once you get COVID,
Understood.
the therapeutics help you. The vaccine, the shots are not going to help you.
Now this is in
Correct.
They're not.
That's not what they were created for.
No. And people don't have running water. I mean, you have people who are living in these densely populated homes.
recirculation road.
Correct.
No, and y'all are running after. If you just get the vaccine, you're going to be fine. The Yankees have disproved that theory. Okay, because all those
Correct.
jokers are
Yes,
popping
ma'am.
up. I mean, they're just popping up, pop, 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 pop.
Multiple South Shoreline trains, as you have
How did this go? How is this supposed to go?
Right.
Nah, I don't think so.
I'm Mary DeBadges.
You know, and my thing is, if you all would just tell the truth,
to work to hop over to
Exactly.
just tell the truth.
or the TuneIn Radio app.
Help
Tell
the
it.
people.
Tell
By
us.
telling the truth.
Tell us that we're in phase 3 of a clinical trial, because that's what this is. Tell the truth. Then, if you language it that way and say we're in a clinical trial because we've got an airborne disease, this is the best we can do right now. I promise you, more people would be inclined, or you'd have another kind of atmosphere. But what they're going to do is bully people. I got a problem
Bully
with that.
people, yeah.
No, it's not going to
Yeah.
work, and it's not going to. Hey, I was saying just before we got on, Raphael and Daryl and Shirley from Philadelphia, and Daphne and Carol Soskin. Look, Dr. King brought into the American experience
Donors
nonviolence.
Support
The
a
Pilgrims
classroom.
do not get down like that.
Did you
The
know?
Pilgrims
A minute.
will shoot and kill. That is part of their experience, which is why
Let's do the math.
they are frightened
That comes out
Native Americans,
Indigenous people,
Africans, and everybody else.
Not right.
No,
At Donors Choose,
because we don't
we
do
want
that. You don't
students
just
and teachers
kill
to have the tools they
everybody.
need
Nobody,
for a
no,
great
we don't do
education.
that.
And now, more than ever,
There's a
they need
wonderful
your
show
help.
on Shaka
Here's what you
Zulu,
can
and they
do.
said, no, you
Go
don't.
to DonorsChoose.org
You
and choose from teachers'
defeat your
requests that
enemy,
support
but you
reading,
don't vanquish
math,
them,
science, history,
because
and more.
they have
Once the
children
request is funded,
who
we'll
will
take
then
care
come
of
after
shipping
you or your
everything
children.
directly to the teacher.
Gotta think,
It's that easy.
True.
think with the
You'll
long
receive
view.
30 seconds.
Long game. Yeah.
Also, the Yankees, they may have caught it, but none of them had severe symptoms, just so you know.
No, I'm very clear on that. I've said that already in my headlines. But the fact is, they're still passing it. And that is something that people need to be mindful of.
True.
Because they have not emphasized, Dylan, that
We're coming in.
this is a mitigating.
Coming in.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Determined, unstoppable, achieving the impossible. We're standing tall with our heads held high. We are victorious.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It is Tuesday, May 18th, 2021. I'm Santita Jackson. It is a joy to be with you on WCPT, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 radio, Minneapolis, St. Paul, the voice of progressive Minnesota. They touch all corners of that state and all around the country and all around the world. Please meet my morning stars over here on the Santita Jackson and Friends page on Facebook and on the WCPT 820 Facebook page. And please like and subscribe to my Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Oh, I love it, love it, love it, love it. And meet me over on Instagram on the Santita Jackson IG and Twitter at Santita J. I also have another handle, but I'm not using it that much. That's at Santita J Show. But the at Santita J at Santita J is really how you reach me. So everybody, Raphael and Shirley from Philadelphia, and Daryl and Daphne and Brian and Carol from the left coast out in LA, Brian and Dawn and Lydia Bob out there in San Jose, and Philip and Adrian and Francis and Barbara out there in Oak Park, and Carol Crowley and Mark. Michael Ann, I'm sending you all my love, Francis, today. So please keep it coming. What are we going to be talking about today? We're going to talk about pillbillies. Dylan, I'm getting a little feedback here. Pillbillies. Yeah, the contempt that people have for the poor is stunning, whether they are white, black, brown, yellow, or red. These big pharma execs have been referring to the people who they dumped all these opioid pills on as pillbillies, as in hillbillies, but pillbillies. How awful. We're going to talk with Chris McGreal about that. And then there's a black woman homeowner in Indianapolis who she wanted to get her daughter a home, so she said, I'm going to take the equity in my house and I want to get a home for my child. So let me get my home appraised. They kept appraising her home, a little more than $100,000, but when she had a white friend stand in for her, they doubled the value. Got to talk about that. The appraisers, you need to watch them, everybody. You need to watch them. And of course, John Nichols is going to be talking about the Middle East. What is happening over there? It is a tragedy, and it is an unending tragedy, and it's unfolding, it's unending. What can we do to have Palestinian justice and Israeli security? And Israeli security, I mean, and what are we going to do? What are we going to do? You know, a very dear friend of mine, a brilliant pastor, said, clouds run out of rain. Think about that. This cannot continue. This cannot continue, particularly when Americans are giving Israel almost $4 billion in aid. Is that helping? Is that helping? Is that helping? Is that helping? Got to talk about that and more on the Santita Jackson Show, but let's get to some of these headlines in Chicago. It's going to be beautiful today. 71 degrees, scattered showers. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 74 degrees, scattered showers. Dow is going to close down. It closed down yesterday at 54 points. The S&P 500 closed down 10 points. The NASDAQ closed down 50 points. The White Sox yesterday, did they have a day? 16-4 over the Twins. Now, the Twins can come back today. They're facing off against the White Sox tonight. But wow, 16-4 White Sox over the Twins. And the Cubs had a great day yesterday. Cubs 7, the Nationals 3. They're going to face them a game tonight. It'll be a great baseball day here in the Midwest. The Roe versus Wade challenge is on deck, everybody. We are going to have to be watching that. National Nurses United. The union president is criticizing CDC guidance that vaccinated people can largely forego masks. Now, this is the largest nurses union in the United States. It said one problem is that it relies on an honor system in which unvaccinated people still mask up. At least one local leader of National Nurses United has already said such a system just isn't working. What do you think about that? What do you think about that, everybody? President Biden is supporting a ceasefire call with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Did you know that he was raised in Park, Philadelphia? Yeah, absolutely. He's a Philly guy. President Biden voiced support for a ceasefire in a call with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, as Israel said airstrikes in the Gaza Strip targeted a tunnel network used by Hamas amid rising civilian casualties in the conflict. Now, more than 200 Palestinians were killed in a week, according to officials. Quite deadly, everybody, including 59 children. Wow. A huge loss has been compounded by the fact that Israel has also killed top doctors in these airstrikes. Gaza's medical infrastructure suffered a major blow on Sunday as 2 senior doctors died amid the ongoing Israeli bombing campaign that killed at least 200 Palestinians and wounded more than 1,300 others. Wow, everybody. We're going to be talking about that with John Nichols of The Nation magazine. In the meantime, President Biden has pushed $735 million in weapons sales to Israel amid this conflict. Now, mind you, that deal had been worked out before this happened, but a lot of people are criticizing that. Nearly 30 Democrats, led by Senator John Ossoff out of Georgia, are calling for an immediate ceasefire, and Senator Sanders, for his portion, is saying that we must take a hard look. The United States must take a hard look at nearly $4 billion in annual military aid to Israel, and Amnesty International is looking for the ICC, the International Criminal Court, to probe war crimes. There is a lot going on, and we are going to be talking about that today on the Santita Jackson Show. Well, what about this, everybody? Do you think that people should be charged 589% interest? Well, guess what? In the pandemic, the terms of loans have shot through the roof. For certain providers of payday and other high-interest loans, they're charging as much as 589% interest. That's something we're going to talk about on the Santita Jackson Show in the coming days. South Carolina governor has signed a bill that is absolutely stunning, everybody. It's going to force death row inmates to choose the firing squad or the electric chair. You can't make this stuff up, everybody. In the meantime, Russia is warning the West against Arctic encroachment ahead of the talks. You know, remember, Alaska didn't belong to them. Something is always happening all the time. We've got good news with the teaching pastor of Salem Baptist Church, the House of Hope. Of course, the author of Mirror Moments we have got, Pastor Stephen Thurston. How you doing, Pastor Thurston? What is the good news today? We need some good news.
I know it, Santita. So much is happening all the time.
I just try to find
all the time.
I just try to let you know what's going on, and then I find these things, like the firing squad or what?
Yes.
Come on, you guys. It just sounds
yeah.
great.
Let me see if I can give us a slither of hope in all of this. I want to talk about the strategy for struggle because, as I noticed, the space and the place of this pandemic has proven several things for me. I don't have time to unpack all of that, but several things. But one of the key things that I've noticed is that it's proven the importance of substance over style. And that's one of the great things that I appreciate about your show, Santita. You give a substance over the style. And for the most For those of us most comfortable just kind of coasting through life in the lane of comfortability and complacency, many of us in that role have been put in the position of taking the shot over passing the ball in this place of the pandemic. And while that can be unnerving and even unsettling, the exciting aspect for me about where we are is that many of us have now been put in a place where the reality is that we have nothing to lose and everything to gain. That's where I get excited. And I know that you may not have looked at it from this perspective, but normal doesn't exist in many contexts. We're all writing new rules and a new playbook on a daily basis. And I hear you. But, Stephen, you don't get it. I'm down to my last. My back is against the wall. I'm up against all odds. And my response to that, Santita, is congratulations. You've got now no choice but to succeed. Sometimes the bottom is the best place to be because all you've got to go is up. It's time for you to switch into Steph Curry mode. We're still in the NBA season. You got to switch into Steph Curry mode now and fire off the half-court shot with just seconds left on the clock and trust your abilities, just like he does, that he's going to go in all net. Now, I know that scares some people, that change can intimidate a whole lot of people for a whole lot of reasons. And some of us are struggling with detaching from what we did to get to where we are. But listen, sometimes you got to leave behind what you did to get to where you are so that you can get to where you need to be. Some of those things aren't needful and necessary anymore, and we've got to make the shift. That's why it's a great place to be in, because we're writing a new playbook. We're creating new rules and new systems. And whatever field you're in, what area of maybe leadership capacity that you might be serving in, keep in mind that the people who work with you, the people who follow you, are simply wanting to experience something pure and something real from what you give them. People need what you offer to have authenticity and the ability to lift them from their everyday experience and set them down in something breathtakingly amazing. So here it is. Now is the time, like never before, for some of us to be more aggressive, creative, and resourceful. These are going to be key components to surviving these changing times successfully. But here's the problem. Too many of us have a mindset that we want to succeed, and that's not going to cut it. You've got to switch that. You got to have the mindset that I need to succeed, because that's a whole different level of thinking and passion. And I don't want us to succumb to struggle in this season. I need us to strategize with the struggle. And here's just a couple of things that I want to encourage you to do to better position yourself for success. Number one, utilize your resources. Now, I know most people think about money when I say resources, but there are many more resources than just money. It extends beyond that. Look at all that you have and all that you have access to get to where you're trying to go. Number two, we got to keep it real. We got to strive for authenticity in everything that we're doing. And I've learned that the more humble, authentic, and integrous you are, the better your chances are at attracting support and help along this journey. Number three, optimize your time. Again, so many of us are still at home. We're not in the office. So it can get easy and be easy for us to allow the day to wither away. A laziness can creep in. It can arrest your potential. Procrastination is ad nauseum. I need you to create a schedule, a to-do list, but most importantly, a to-don't list. Set your goals. Make the best use of your time. Engage in the appropriate opportunities and actions. Number four, I need us to position ourselves to profit from problems. We're all going to be rewarded for solving other people's problems, helping them to reach their desired end, and filling holes in various marketplaces. You got to, number five, put passion behind your purpose. If you don't believe in yourself, your business, your services, or the products that you produce, you can't expect other people to do that. People invest in you before they invest in what you're offering. Number six, understand the end user. You got to show people on the other side of what you do that you're sensitive to things from their perspective, that you have their best interests in mind. And finally, number seven, we got to expect success. Faith without hope is just wishful thinking. Good things come to those who expect it. Now, this isn't just pie in the sky talk, but a push to keep your goals in sight and in reach, believing that success is your portion. Listen, as broken as some of us are, as broke financially as some of us might be right now, remember that we're all rich in possibility, rich in hope, rich in dreams, and rich in determination. You're going to move through this place of struggle, not functioning from desperation, but my goal is to get you to function from inspiration. I've just given you some strategies for your struggle.
I love that. I needed that today. I hope that all of you have been blessed by this wonderful word from Pastor Stephen Thurston, the teaching pastor of the Salem Baptist Church, the House of Hope. When can we hear you again? When will you be preaching from the House of Hope, Salem Baptist Church?
This Sunday at 11 a.m. Central Standard Time. Sunday, 11 a.m. Central Standard. You can catch us if you're local in Chicago on WJYS live on television, on the Salem Baptist Church of Chicago YouTube page, Facebook page, or our website, salembaptistchurchofchicago.org.
Amen, amen, amen. Thank you so much. Hey, strategies for the struggle. We all need them. I know I do. Blessings to you, Pastor Thurston. But stay right here because we've got Pastor Wow. She's ministerial in her zeal. We love Dr. Deborah Holden, one of the world's preeminent epidemiologists. And there's a lot going on. Dr. Deborah Holden, Associate Dean of Public Health at Michigan State University, straight out of Johns Hopkins University. I want to ask you about the National Nurses United, which is the largest nurses union in the United States. And they're calling on the Centers for Disease Control. Now, these are the nurses, the biggest nursing union in the United States, to revoke the guidance on mask wearing and social distancing that they released. They're saying that these scaled-back guidelines are calling them dangerous as the U.S. and other countries continue to face this COVID-19 pandemic and these new variants. What do you make of that?
Well, with these new variants, I've been letting people know this is one of those things. We don't want to learn all that we have to learn at the expense of people's lives and well-being. We did the show on Sunday looking at what was happening in Brazil, which I think has caught some people's attention, but I don't think it's caught everybody's attention. And people just don't realize how this thing is ravaging some countries. I think we've even become a bit numb to the death and the rates that we see in our own country and even in our own communities. I was really moved by the numbers in children. And we're talking about a place where we know they have major barriers with testing and access. So they admit that most of the numbers that they report are likely underestimates because a lot of people who are positive simply won't have any way to validate that, and so they won't get counted as a COVID case. And I was just really blown away to see how many children have died in Brazil from COVID, how many infants have died in Brazil because of COVID. The reported number, and they estimate that that's probably more like half. It was almost 900 have died, 4 and under. Almost 900 children. Can you imagine being a mom and giving birth after 7-8 months of pregnancy, and you give birth to a baby that's stillborn that literally died in your womb from COVID? That's what's happening. And so, the best thing that we can do is we need to stop the spread. We need to stop this virus from spreading, and we need to slow down the rate of these variants, because the more it spreads, the more we'll get variants. And each one of these variants seems to have its own unique flavor that makes it a little more harmful than the original strain that got introduced last year.
We're talking with Dr. Deborah Holden, epidemiologist. She's with us every day, giving us really trusted information about COVID-19, about our health, about the coronavirus, about what we can do, not only to survive COVID-19 and the coronavirus, but, the number one killer in the United States is still heart disease. And we have got cancer that is still ravaging So, everyone, please, now that things are beginning to open up a little bit more, please, 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 please go get your physicals. But let me ask you this very quickly. What do people do if they don't have a primary care physician? Can you still go get a physical?
Absolutely. Can you get a physical without a primary care physician? Yeah. You can get a physical without a primary. Say that again?
What would you suggest people do? Because I think that, we've paid so much attention to COVID, and we should, right? That, we're seeing, and you and I have talked about this, we're seeing an epidemic of women, for example, particularly Black and brown women, frontline workers, who are getting tested now because, my arm hurts, is something under my arm, it's bothering me, my back is bothering me, and then they've got stage 4 breast cancer. We're seeing that, right? So, what do you recommend that people do? I mean, in addition to dealing with COVID, because we've got to deal with it all right now, Dr. Verhoeven.
Well, and unfortunately, what happened earlier in the pandemic is all primary and preventive care got shut down. Hospitals stopped doing elective procedures. Many physicians and other healthcare providers started to initiate telehealth services, but that was new for many people, right? A lot of the providers hadn't done it. It's so funny that, there was a lot of what we just couldn't do and couldn't figure out before COVID that now is just the status quo, right? So telehealth is now so normal. Most physicians are tapped into that. But yeah, we saw a big dip in primary care and preventive screening. We talk about the COVID vaccine. Childhood vaccinations were at an all-time low. And we can track that because, we've got basically one, registry through the CDC where all childhood vaccines get tracked. And the numbers, there were about a third fewer vaccinations last year than there have been in the years prior. Okay. And so I encourage people not to take their foot off the gas with their own primary and preventive care because, like when we look at breast cancer, for example, we've seen now this year this big spike and surge in the number of breast cancer cases in African American women, and even worse in breast cancer related death. But I don't actually think that that's new. I think what happened is these women didn't get diagnosed last year because of COVID. And so they were late to get diagnosed and late to get treated. And with most cancers, especially breast cancer, the earlier you identify and treat, the better the outcome. And so I think we're seeing the kind of what I call collateral damage of COVID and the impact of, these lapses in care. So, people need primary care. And if you don't have a primary care physician, or if you don't have health insurance, I just remind people that it's extended enrollment for affordable care.
Okay, I've got 10 seconds.
I know a lot of people who, reach out to your local federally qualified health center or your local health plan. You can get insurance and access to a primary care provider.
I know we covered a lot of territory today, but we need to do it, Dr. Deborah Verhoeven. We're going to talk about this Black woman down in Indianapolis, Indiana. She kept trying to get her house assessed. When they found that she's a Black woman, it was $100,000. And guess what? When her white friend stepped in, the assessment of her house doubled. Wow. That's just a minute. Dr. Deb? Deborah? Ooh, I know she's there. Deb?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, no, I was bringing that up, but this woman, she was trying to get it. She said, I'm going to take the equity in my house and give it to my child. Buy a house for her. And they just kept, the comparables in her neighborhood, it just didn't match. So she had her white friend step in, and it more than doubled the assessment of her home, the appraisal.
Yeah. That's unfortunate. Good for her that she got that straight, but bad that that's how things work.
It happens all the time. So I'm about to bring on C.K. Hoffler and
Miss Ireland's here.
Okay, Mrs. Ireland. This is one of my oldest friends in the world. Oh, I mean, we're sorors from Howard University. We were at Whitney Young High School together. We were at Howard together. Oh, she and I go back, 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 way back. Oh my gosh.
Good morning.
Good morning, Stephanie Ireland. And this is Dr. Deborah Verholden. She's one of the world's most renowned epidemiologists. She comes out of Johns Hopkins, but she's really helping to build the School of Public Health at Michigan State University. So she's between those places now. And so we're so proud of her. And I'm so proud of my Stephanie, Dr. Deb. I love
Attorney Hoffler's here.
HGTV. Thank you. I love HGTV. And I'm watching one night House Hunters. I'm looking. I said, that's Stephanie. What? She's selling a house at House Hunters. Oh. And it was so late I couldn't call anybody. But the next morning I burned up the phone lines. I was like, oh my gosh. Let me record this. Like, wait a minute. I was so excited. But Dr. Deb, I love you. I'm going to call you a little bit later today, okay? Do you want to stay and listen? Do you want to stay and listen? Stay and listen. Stay right here. Listen. Because this is a story.
Dr. Deb dropped.
Oh, please get her back. Oh, she dropped? Okay. And CK, okay, I hear something in the background. Okay, just remember, you got to keep everything very quiet. CK Hoffler?
Good morning, Santita.
Good morning.
So you do want me to get Dr. Deb back? I'm sorry.
You can ask her if she wants to come back. Well, I know she's got to do.
Okay, I'll call her up in that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and you have...
CK Hoffler, Attorney Hoffler.
You have both Hoffler and Ireland here.
Okay, Mrs. Ireland. Okay, very good.
Good morning.
Good morning. And CK Hoffler, I want you to meet one of my oldest friends in the world. And, we went to high school together. We went to Howard together. We're sorors, all of that. Alpha Chapter sorors. Hello. And she is my girl, and I'm so proud of her. She and her husband have a really tremendous real estate firm. And one of the things that she really tries to do is really increase Black home ownership. That's like their mission.
Okay.
That's their
Wonderful.
Mission. And she's someone you should know. And because I think more people need to know about the work that she and her husband do. And she's focused. She's based in the DMV, but she is all over the place. DC, Maryland, Virginia. So, Attorney C.K. Hoffler is the president of the National Bar Association and chair of Rainbow Push. I want you to meet Mrs. Stephanie Ireland. And Stephanie Ireland, I want you to meet Attorney C.K. Hoffler.
Good morning, Attorney Hoffler. Good morning. How are you? Now, were you all doing wonderful? Was this the same chapter? Ethel Isaacs Williams is one of my closest friends as well. Was she? Did she pen you off?
She penned my line. Yes. I've got my girl.
Yeah.
Here we go. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. It is Tuesday, May 18th, 2021. I'm Santita Jackson. I want you to call me at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. And I want you to like and share. We've been talking about COVID-19. We've gotten some good news from Pastor Stephen Thurston, COVID-19 information from and our health care information from Dr. Deborah Verholden, brilliant epidemiologist, associate dean of public health at Michigan State University. But now I've got two people who are very, very dear to me. Introducing one to you, someone who is a regular on this show. In fact, she's going to have her own show. She's going to be running off of our show to do her own on the iconic WAOK radio station in Atlanta, Georgia. If you want some free legal advice, everybody, that you generally have to pay thousands of dollars for because she costs a lot of money, but she's very fair. We love her, but she's the best. She's the president of the National Bar Association and the chair of Rainbow Push, and her show comes on at 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time today on WAOK, Attorney C.K. Hoffler, the People's Attorney. But I'm introducing to you someone who you've seen on the chat line, everybody, with the Morning Stars. Indeed, she's like one of our Morning Stars, but she is also the owner of the Ireland Group. It's a great real estate firm out of the DMV. DC, Maryland, Virginia. She's a Howardite, yes. We're sorors from Delta Sigma Theta at Howard University. And we also went to Whitney Young here in Chicago. Chicago Public Schools in the house. So Stephanie Ireland's with us today. Yay! Hey, that's right.
Good morning.
Good morning. I'm so glad you're with us today, Stephanie and CK. Let me bring up this story to you because this was something that was just stunning to me. This black homeowner in Indianapolis, Carlette Duffy. She filed a complaint after her home value doubled when a white friend stood in for an appraisal. Now, she lives in Indianapolis, Indiana. She said in the pandemic, you know what? I want to get my daughter a house. I want to get my daughter started. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the equity in my home and I want to use it to help my daughter get started. And that's when she saw something that was not quite right. She said, the value of my home. How is it that my home is worth less now than what I paid for it? And this home's in good shape. What's going on? Well, she had her white friend stand in for her after she kind of caught on after doing this a few times. And guess what? The appraisal doubled. Stephanie, you need to break this story down for us. Are you surprised? I mean, the value of the home went from a little more than $100,000 to $259,000. First of all, break this story down for us. What is this? And have you seen something like this before?
Well, unfortunately, this is happening a little bit more in the market. I'm not sure if it's occurring more or we're just more cognizant of it. People are paying attention now. But yes, just myself personally, and I've dealt with this 5 times in the last 6 months with clients. And it's not just on the appraisal side. It can be on the for purchase side. It's happening with refinances. It can happen with your value, and it can happen with things that I'd like to say that just simply frustrate the seller, where Black homeowners are getting more conditions in their appraisals than maybe someone else would. Those are requests for repairs or upgrades or things like that. Things that you normally don't see in appraisals that would happen necessarily in other neighborhoods or appraisals done for other segments of the population.
Now, Stephanie Ireland, please break this down because I'm trying to figure this out. So you're letting me know that, you know, when I saw you on House Hunters on HGTV, and you did have a Black family, and you were really trying to help guide them through the process. This seems like this is very subjective, and so you're saying that. Are you saying really that Black people pay more, and they get paid less for their houses? Is that kind of how it works?
Well, what happens is you get an appraisal. Anytime you want to refinance your home or purchase a home or do anything with a bank where, you know, there's money involved, the bank is going to send out an appraiser to assess the value of that home. And while appraisers have great tools and it is analysis, part of it is subjectivity. And so there's nothing that can filter out the subjectivity that an appraiser may have. And in several instances, there are situations, and I've dealt with them personally with my clients, where there are no conditions other than the race of the occupant or the owner of the home that can explain the disparity between what one house appraised for that's owned by another segment of the population versus my client who is African American.
Attorney C.K. Hoffler, do you have any legal recourse? I mean, what is this?
Well, plain and simply, it's discrimination. And it happens all the time. I've had this happen to me. I've had to dispute issues. I mean, we know as a homeowner, I think I've owned property for 30 plus years. Every time I sell a piece of property, we have to completely take off the walls, do everything so that there's no way that the prospective buyers know that there is a Black family or a Black person that owns that property. And even though the real estate agents won't say that per se, a lot of the Black real estate agents will guide you in that way because they know what time it is. And I've owned property in D.C., in Norfolk, Virginia, in Florida, and now in Atlanta. So it doesn't matter whether it's in a community that has, in a broader community that has African Americans that are doing well, who are fluent, or if it's in a community that has no Black people, or very few, as it was when I was in Stuart, Florida. That's just a reality. In fact, 2 homes that were, large-size homes, we sold them within a year after we moved. So we moved, the house was empty, completely empty, and that's when we sold it. And we had open houses, and everybody, oh, the house is beautiful, it looks beautiful, this beautiful, over there, all that. And not a single offer. But once we moved and everything was out of the house, it sold like, not a problem. Cash offers in Florida, which is not so unusual. So this is discrimination, plain and simply. It's discrimination. There's no question about it. The only issue is how do you prove it, and the recourse is litigation. And so this is where it's important when you have an administration, as we do now, with the U.S. Housing Department. I mean, we have to look at these types of issues, raise them there, and also bring litigation when there's evidence and when there's proof. These cases are difficult to prove, but they could, this is discrimination. I mean, whether it's in the selling, whether it's in the appraisal bias has been going on. I've always known of that. That's why we need, because there are very few Black appraisers. And that's why it's so important to, like in other industries, make sure that we are diversifying. Because again, once people become cognizant of these issues, become more aware of these issues, there is a greater attempt to address these issues. But I don't think this is new based on my experience as a lawyer. I think this is commonplace. I think it's just getting there's more awareness now. That's the only difference. And yes, there is legal recourse, but they're difficult cases to prove.
Stephanie, how do you explain this process, the appraisal process? I mean, Miss Duffy was trying to help her daughter get started. We can all understand that. She said, while things have slowed down, let me get my home appraised. Let me take equity out of my home and get my daughter a home herself. Okay, walk us through this process. How does that work? Because you might can you get your home appraised to try and get a loan for home repairs, all that sort of stuff, right?
Right. So anytime the bank is going to lend you money based on your home as an asset, they want to do an assessment of value. And the person that does that assessment of value is a licensed appraiser. Now, the appraiser doesn't work for the bank, but there's someone that's hired by the bank. They're independent. And that person will go out to the house, and they're supposed to, look at things about the house. How many bedrooms? How many bathrooms? What's the condition of the home? Where is it located? What amenities are in the community? What homes have sold in the general area in the same condition? Does this house have a garage or any features that might make it different from other homes, more value? And that's what they do. They go through an analysis process, and I'm not an appraiser, but that's the process that they go through to come to a value of the home. And that value is then what the bank uses to determine whether they're going to lend you money or how much money they will lend you based on the value of your home. So the problem comes in if you're trying to do a refinance and your home does not appraise at the value where you thought it should be or what you need, it impacts the amount of money that the bank can lend you, or in Ms. Duffy's case, the amount of money or equity that she has in her home to be able to use to finance other investments, purchases, college tuition. It can impact a number of things. The appraiser will prepare a report. That report goes to both the buyer and the bank, and that's where the issues, can start. When I'm working with my clients, I practice offense because that's the best defense. We pull our own comps. We do our own analysis. We do what's called a comparative market analysis so that we know all the sales. We know the conditions of the homes that have sold around it. There's a lot of information you can get as a realtor. And when we're having appraisals done, and this is both for my clients that are purchasing homes and even my clients that are doing refis, because that's where some of the issues are, they'll call me and say, I need some comps. I need to know the market value of my home before I get this appraisal done. We do all of that work up front so that when that appraiser gets there, they know that we already know what this house is worth. And so that we're educated on the process and the value.
Can you ever challenge an appraisal, Stephanie?
Yes, you can, but it's very difficult. Unfortunately, appraisals, while they say it's a science, it's still a part of an opinion. Typically, the way to challenge an appraisal is if you see an error that's in the appraisal. Your home is 5 bedrooms and they only mention 4. You have a fully finished basement and they only mention 2 levels. We've challenged appraisals where the appraiser, it was quite evident that he went outside of the community to use comps that were over 9 months old, which they're supposed to only use comps within the last 6 months. He went outside the community, used disparate properties and properties that were an older sale date versus using properties within the same gated community that had sold 2 to 3 months ago. We challenged it. We still were not successful, even though it was clear that the appraiser violated his own rules where they're supposed to use comps within 6 months. There was nothing that can be done. Appraisers, like attorney C.K. Hoffler said, a lot of times it has to come to litigation because when the housing market was sort of broken apart, appraisers are independent, lenders are independent, and realtors are independent. This was all after the housing market kind of crashed in 2008. There was thought to be too much collusion or information sharing between all 3 parties. So we're all independent. Appraisers are typically managed by something called AMCs, appraisal management companies, which in my estimation are really just administrative scheduling companies. They will schedule an appraiser, but they're really independent. They kind of take the orders from the banks. It's really the spin of the wheel who you get, so it's totally independent, and that person goes out. What happens is, in my estimation, there's no accountability. The AMCs are not empowered to force the appraisers to make any corrections, to make them change their appraisal. The appraisers feel anybody trying to influence them, is a conflict of interest. And I've never really had one to make changes, or an AMC to be able to force an appraiser to make changes. So it's difficult. So my clients get frustrated. They order another appraisal. That's additional cost. So that's what keeps happening. And until you can get to an appraiser that's fair, honest, and objective. What I typically encourage my clients to do, each state has an appraisal regulatory commission, is to report them. Not enough people report these situations, so they just continue to go on. In my area, and I'm in Prince George's County, we keep a list of appraisers that we've encountered where we've had issues. And when I'm doing additional transactions, I kind of let the AMCs know that this is not somebody I want to work with.
We're talking with Stephanie Ireland. She's a partner senior real estate specialist. Indeed, I saw her on HGTV. Yes. She and her husband have the Ireland Group in the DMV in DC, Maryland, and Virginia. And we are talking about this case out of Indianapolis with attorney C.K. Hoffler, president of the National Bar Association, where a Black homeowner had a white friend stand in for her 3rd appraisal, and her home value doubled. But see, attorney C.K. Hoffler, you just said something. You said, wait a minute, we don't have enough Black appraisers. I mean,
absolutely.
You had to move out of your house?
Just move out of my house. But I got one better for you. 1970. We wanted to move into a neighborhood. We were the first Black family to move into there. They wouldn't sell us the house. My mother's a Catholic. The Catholic Church bought the house, and because my mother spoke to the priest, and sold it to us. Wow. Buffalo, New York. Yes. Yes. So,
I'm
there.
speechless.
Well, that's real life.
And that was 50 years ago. And now, Stephanie, you're telling me that this is happening right now. I mean, C.K. Hoffler, not 20 years ago, you had to move out of your house before it was sold.
Yeah, that was 10 years ago.
10
Yeah,
years
that was 10 years ago.
That's crazy. I mean, but
Yeah.
and Stephanie, please, yes.
So we're getting to that point. I mean, I just had a conversation with a lender yesterday, and we were talking about this very same issue of, do we advise our clients to sanitize, the house, take down all their black art, remove their pictures and things like that. And I kind of refuse to go that way, because I believe, we all have a right to be our true, authentic selves. So I'm of the other end. If the appraisal, if there are issues that I think are not in line with what an appraisal should be, then I'm going to lodge a complaint. I'm going to go to the appraisal regulatory agencies, and I'm going to go to the lenders, and I'm going to go to Yelp, and I'm going to, fight it from that end, because we should have a right to live in our homes and still have the same value as any other homeowner in America. And I have the benefit of living in Prince George's County, which, is known as the largest largest and wealthiest African-American county in the country. And we still have that issue here. And it's not new. It's been going on. It's just more prevalent now, and people are more aware of it now and taking action now.
Well, if I could add, Santita, we're in a social justice space for now. I don't know how long it's going to last, let's be clear, but for now. And so these types of issues are resonating more with some folks who are for the first time seeing it. We know it's been going on forever, but for the first time seeing it. And this is an opportunity for us to raise these issues. We have a HUD secretary who I think would be receptive to intervening on these types of issues, forming commissions to study this. I'm sure that it's happened before, because it's been going on for a very long time. And I do believe, just like Ms. Ireland is saying, we should be allowed to be our authentic self. But if you're carrying 2 mortgages and you have moved, or you're divorcing, or you have financial distress, you have all these things going on which are causing you to need to sell your property, at the end of the day, you're making a business decision, and you are going to take, I call it de-blackify, and I say that sarcastically. De-blackify your house so that when people come to your house to see it, that they don't recognize that there are Black folks living there. It's a tragedy. It's awful. We should do something about it. The only way to do something about it is litigation. By the way, there's been litigation on these issues for a very long time. But I think in this social justice space that we find ourselves in right at this moment, don't know how long it'll last, but at this moment, if there were a time to raise these issues and to heighten awareness on a different level, federal level, so that there could be something with real teeth in it that can prevent these appraisers from doing this, where there are consequences and things like that. It's now. It's now, but people need to be aware that this is happening. It's still happening. So long as you have people who are willing to take over this country and storm the Capitol on January 6th of this year, yelling racially derogatory things against Black and brown people, we're going to have this type of issue in many communities. And it's not just communities that are closed communities. I live in the Atlanta metropolitan area. And it was Ireland said she's in the PG County area. There's wealth galore, ostensibly, in that area, the richest county for Blacks in the country. And it still happens every single day. So it's systemic, just as racism is systemic. Racism is a pandemic. So we have to address this the same way that we address other racial barriers. And unfortunately, It's through litigation, which takes time. So in the meantime, people are making business decisions. I gotta unload this property. I gotta do this. I gotta do that. But it's important to do their homework first. The comps, I do that all the time. Make sure that I have all the information that I need, because I am going to fight. But I recognize that I have the tools to fight, because that's what I do for a living, and that's not lost on the people who are on the other side. If there's an aberration, that is not lost on them, because I go in armed with certain types of things.
Exactly.
And that does make a difference. And so It's unfortunate, but that's what people have to do. Raise the questions beforehand. I have spoken to appraisers. They don't like it and everything. I'm like, well, whatever, it's my problem. I have spoken to appraisers and said, well, wait a minute. And that makes them very nervous.
Absolutely.
That makes them very nervous, because I start throwing legal stuff around, and I don't want to flex and all that, but I am not going to stand for that level of discrimination again. And so when you are a victim of it, or your clients are a victim of it, your family's a victim of it, you have to raise the questions. Have, companies such as Ms. Ireland's company that understand these issues, know how to position the issues, know how to leverage it, know how to do that. That's what you got to do.
And you know what? And I have the poster of her company on my Facebook page. The last 2 minutes belong to you, Stephanie. What should we do if we encounter something like, when we're trying to refinance a house, or we're trying to sell a house? Take us through this last 2 minutes.
Okay, so I think the first thing you should do is, before you even get to that point, think about the lender that you're choosing. I know a lot of people like to call 1-800-whatever, but in a lot of circumstances, that's not the best advocate for you. Real estate is also a relationship business. You should work with a lender, in my opinion, that's local to your community, that knows your community. That's your first start. Work with a realtor that's in your community, that knows your community, that can prepare you what's called a CMA, a comparative market analysis, so that you go into the process already knowing what your home is worth. I give that information to the appraisers, because it's like, here you go. I know what the value is of this home, and what your report should reflect. And once they know that you know, then I tend to find that things turn out the way that I would have expected them to. So, know your home's worth. Take an inventory of any updates, upgrades in your home, prepare a list, give that to the appraiser so that they know the roof is new, or that you replaced all the granite, hardwood floors, things like that. And then I would say trust your instincts. If something doesn't feel right, report. A lot of people just stay silent. You have to find the appropriate agencies in your state and file a formal complaint. Unfortunately, that's one of the only ways that we're going to be able to get some of the bad appraisers out of here, and be able to get the values that truly reflect the values of our home.
Stephanie Ireland of the Ireland Group, everybody. I want you to get in touch with her in D.C., Maryland, and Virginia. You want to buy a house, you want to sell a house, you want to refinance, all of that. That's what she and her husband do, and they do it better than anybody in the nation, of course. Certainly C.K. Hoffman will be on WAOK Tuesday, 10 o'clock Central Standard Time, 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Can't wait to hear what she's going to talk about today. Coming up, Hillbillies. Yeah, P-I-L-L, Billies. That is what Big Pharma has been saying about these opioid addicts. Poor white people in West Virginia. Back in just a minute. Stephanie, now did it hurt? No.
Yes. No.
No. See, you got to come back.
No, it didn't hurt.
There you go.
Yeah, well, sure, I will. This is just, it's such a sensitive subject, and I get so worked up about it. I just want to make sure I say the right things.
Oh,
because it kind of,
you're a past master.
Pisses me off that it happened.
You know what this is.
So,
what's going on?
Yeah.
I'm not, and you got to come back because I think CK she needs to do a clinic on refinancing and selling a house. Because most of us, we just in buying a house. You got to come back, Stephanie, and do that because we have no.
Yeah, well, Greg and I, we do a lot of home buying seminars, and it's amazing. We get so many people here that just had no clue. And most people don't even know that to buy a home, you can pretty much get a realtor complimentary. Let's just say that. My services aren't free, but a lot of times the buyers don't have to pay for them. So why wouldn't you get the benefit of using a professional versus going it on your own? You know, this buying homes off of the internet, you know, the internet is information, it's not expertise, and you need expertise when you're acquiring, you know, the biggest asset of your life in most cases.
Absolutely. Well, you know, we have to do something with her, CK. So we can,
I'd love to.
yeah.
I'd love to. You know, I ironically, a friend of mine just refinanced her house in D.C. And she said, Black woman attorney, she said she thought she had to give them her children. They put her through. They made her go through so many hoops. She said, I might have. Now she's a tough, I sue you type of that kind of lawyer. You know, very, very. She's someone people would know, so I don't want to call her name. Yeah. But she said, I might have to have you come down here because this doesn't make any sense. My point is that they will, especially now, you know, with the interest rates over the past year when the interest rates were dropping, the kinds of things that Black people are going through are just unthinkable.
Well, that's what happened
just
to
the kind of hoops.
That's what happened to her.
Yeah. I had a client who the house appraised for value, so that wasn't an issue because he really couldn't come in too under because we'd given him the comps. We knew what the value was. So what they did is they frustrated the process. My client has an infant. She had little pictures on her wall with pinholes. He wanted her to paint the entire home because of little pinhook holes on some of the walls. It's crazy. He wanted grass outside. It was January. We're not going to have grass in D.C. It just doesn't happen. This property was Baltimore, but it just doesn't happen. So they frustrated the process. And through that frustration, my client ended up spending $2,000 to $3,000 because unless you can get a clear appraisal, you typically can't go to settlement. So you're at an end.
Well, and you know what they're doing here? I don't know. They have these concierge services that are now attached to real estate companies where, and I use that for one of my transactions where the concierge service will come in and say, there's a little hole, a little bit, and they will come up with a price of what it'll take to fix it. You don't have to pay. It just comes off the back end of the deal. And I was like, this sounds a little janky. But I went through with one of my transactions and used it, and they don't make a profit on it. And the only reason why I know that is because I got to pick the person who would fix everything, and there wasn't a whole lot to be fixed. That's the thing that was really stupid. There wasn't a whole lot for me to be done, but I'll be doggone if my property didn't sell with that little note that they had gone through and blue-ba-doo-ba-doo-doo. And I can tell you when it came to the, you know, when you have the inspection and they have a punch-out list, there's nothing on the punch-out list. So, you know, it's just a way, it's a tool that I know some companies here in the Atlanta metropolitan area are using as a way of overcoming these inequities. But to me, it's all very offensive. When you're on the receiving end of it, it's very disheartening and offensive.
Right.
Well, ladies, I'm going to let you all go because I got to move on to this next segment.
Okay.
But I need you to come back, Stephanie, and I need you to bring that down, Dylan.
Absolutely.
Thank you, girl.
Okay. All right, Stephanie, great meeting.
How are you here?
Meeting you.
All right. Nice meeting you as well. Take care.
Okay. Nice to see you. Bye-bye.
Hello? Yes, Dylan?
Yeah, you're hearing it right now?
Yeah, and it popped up very loudly. And what I need you to do when we're going out, don't turn it up so loudly. Follow me, and I'll get us out because I'm looking at the clock myself. Okay?
Okay. You still here?
Yeah. Okay, do we have Mr. McGreal up?
No, he didn't pick up. I'm going to continue calling him.
Awesome. Thank you. Hey, everybody. Hey. Well, I'm going to have Mrs. Ireland, I'm going to have Stephanie Ireland come back on the show to walk us through how we manage these houses, how we manage refinancing, buying a house for the first time. If you should be a buyer or a renter, because sometimes it's more financially advantageous, particularly now, to rent as opposed to purchase. There's a lot going on here, but you have to talk to the experts. They can tell you exactly what it is that you need to do. For example, if you live in New York City, it's in many respects a renter's market, but you know. What they want for apartments and for homes.
Just so you know, you have about a minute, and he is not picked up, but I will continue calling.
Please continue to reach out to him. Let me reach out to him myself. Okay. 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 Let me try and reach him. Okay.
Hello.
Hi, Chris. He was trying to reach you. Can I have my board op call you now?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, okay.
It might. Well, if he was calling the call didn't come through.
Okay, the call didn't come through. Can I send you a number that you can call into?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Dylan?
Yes.
I'm going to send him the call-in numbers, okay?
Okay.
Because he just picked up. He was waiting.
Oh, okay.
So he's going to call in. Okay, so I'm sending him the studio number. So just be on the lookout, please. But if you don't hear from him, because he just picked up his number.
Okay, I'll come back.
Okay, thank you.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Determined, unstoppable, achieving the impossible. We're standing tall with our heads held high. We are victorious.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show, Tuesday, May 18th, 2021. I'm Santita Jackson. I'm coming to you from WCPT, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. And, of course, you can call me or text me at 773 WCPT, 773-763-9278. Of course, we've got a lot to talk about today. We're going to be talking about the Middle East at the bottom of the hour with John Nichols of The Nation. Boy, it seems like that place is going to explode and things just don't get better. We're going to talk about what is happening and what can be done to get things right over there. And then pillbillies. Have you heard of those? Stay right there. Pillbillies. You talk about the ultimate classist slap. How cruel, how mean, as people talk about these primarily poor white people who are addicted to opioids. Oh, let's get to some of these headlines on the Santita Jackson Show. In Chicago, we're going to have a high of 71 degrees, scattered showers. In Minneapolis, St. Paul, high of 74 degrees, scattered showers. The Dow closed down 54 points yesterday. The S&P closed down 10 points, and the NASDAQ closed down 50 points. Wow, what a day in Major League Baseball in this part of the country. The White Sox faced off against the Twins. The White Sox were triumphant 16-4. Wow. The Twins, will you come back today? Well, we'll know tonight because the White Sox and the Twins will be facing off. The Cubs had a great day, too. Cubs 7, the Nationals 3. They're going to be playing a game once again tonight. Everybody, President Biden is supporting a ceasefire in a call that he had with President Benjamin Netanyahu. This as 42 Palestinians died on Sunday. In fact, more than 200 Palestinians have been killed in the week. More than 1,300 have been wounded. And on top of that loss, Israel has killed 2 of the top doctors, which has further strained the Gaza health system, everybody. And now President Biden has pushed for $735 million in weapons to Israel. And but that was a deal that was cut before the current conflict. And John Ossoff, the newly elected senator from Georgia, is saying we need a ceasefire. At least 30 Senate Democrats have signed on to this measure. And Senator Sanders is saying that America must take a hard look at nearly $4 billion in U.S. military aid to Israel. And Amnesty International is calling for a probe into war crimes. They're asking for the International Criminal Court to look into that. Oh boy, we got a lot to talk about today. Alarm bells are ringing loudly, everybody. The Supreme Court is taking up a case that could reverse Roe v. Wade, everybody. Reproductive rights advocates were outraged but unsurprised yesterday when the U.S. Supreme Court announced that it will hear a challenge to Mississippi's ban on nearly all abortions after 15 weeks of gestation, everybody. South Carolina has signed what some people in South Carolina governor signed what some people are calling an inhumane bill, forcing death row inmates to get this, everybody. They get a chance to choose how they die, by firing squad or electric chair. They must make the choice. Wow. Did you know that payday lenders are charging as much as 589% in interest? During the pandemic, it's booming business and people are going broke. They're going into bankruptcy, everybody. Wow. Let's get to what's happening in West Virginia. One of the biggest cases, something of tremendous consequence. Big Pharma is being called out. They're being called out for their role in helping to further this opioid crisis. What did they do to not just further, what did they do to help create it? That's the question. And so, let's talk about this today. Call me at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. We're talking with Chris McGreal, brilliant writer, and he's been covering this and so much of just how we live every day. And I want you to get his book. It is American Overdose, The Opioid Tragedy in 3 Acts. It turns out Big Pharma executives have been doing something, Chris McGreal, that is just stunning. It is so classist. It is so mean. Or maybe I'm misreading this. I mean, what happened?
Well, there's a trial going on at the moment of 3 of the country's biggest drug distributors, the companies that deliver pharmaceutical products to the pharmacy. And at the trial, there have been various emails from one of the biggest, AmerisourceBergen. It's actually the 10th largest company in the country by revenue. And it turns out that at the time when opioid painkillers were addicting large numbers of people and killing large numbers of people, about a decade ago, internal emails show that, in fact, the executives of this company, which was making very large amounts of money out of delivering millions of pills to these communities, were sending rhymes and jokes and derisory emails around to each other about hillbillies and pillbillies, saying that they were poor mountaineers and talking about hillbilly heroin, and deriding them as illiterate and drug addicts.
Well, and everyone, if you remember the show, the Beverly Hillbillies, you remember the theme song. Well, it kind of went like this. They built a rhyme around the Beverly Hillbillies theme song. They talked about a poor mountaineer named Jed who barely kept his habit fed. Jed travels to Florida to buy hillbilly heroin, the nickname for OxyContin. What do you think about this, everybody? They have been making fun of the people whom they help to addict. Can you please let us know how many pills were dropped on how many people? Chris McGreal, please remind us.
Well, in this particular case, this case is in a little bit of West Virginia, a place called Cabell County. It's just a place of just 90,000 people. These 3 companies delivered 100 million pills just for this one county. They delivered over 1 billion pills to West Virginia as a whole, which is a relatively small state. And, there were billions of pills literally delivered around the country. So we're talking about, very, very large numbers of drugs that were, there is in West Virginia, the classic example is a little town called Kermit, which has a population of about 400 people. And just to that little little town with one pharmacy, there were 8 million pills delivered over just a few years. So that's the scale of what we're talking about. And of course, over the past 20 years, we've had, somewhere between 500,000 and 600,000 people have died of opioid overdoses from prescription pills and then other opioids as part of the epidemic, like heroin and fentanyl. And of course, millions more have seen their lives wrecked. People who've become addicted, become very dependent on these drugs, and their families, their children who've been taken into care, or people who've ended up in prison. So it had an enormous impact.
We're talking with Chris McGreal, the author of American Overdose, The Opioid Tragedy in 3 Acts. He also writes for The Guardian. He's been covering a lot of what happens really throughout America, and he's had a particular focus on this opioid tragedy. How did it happen? How did it start? How has it evolved? And now we're seeing West Virginians are doing something that is really incredible. They're suing the companies. I wish we could do that for crack, but like I said, you got to take your victories where you find them. But in fact, here, OxyContinville, that is what one rhyme by these big pharma executives. The contempt that they have for these people, Chris McGreal, is overwhelming. OxyContinville, and in an email you wrote, one of the hillbillies must have learned how to read. Whoa. Are you surprised by the contempt that these executives have for these people who are addicted to these pills?
No, I'm not actually. Not after reporting on this for many years. It became clear to me that both amongst the drug manufacturers and the distributors, and to be honest, some of the doctors and pharmacies that wrote the prescription dispensed opioid painkillers, that they had complete cynicism about what they were doing. They were making money, and they really didn't care about the lives that were impacted. But it does come across very clearly in these emails. I mean, one of the things that's perhaps quite shocking is that there's a man called Chris Zimmerman. He was a very senior executive at this drug distributor called AmerisourceBergen. And he was the man who was in charge of trying to stop. It was his legal responsibility to stop opioid pills being delivered to pharmacies that shouldn't be getting them. The law required that if a drug distributor saw that a pharmacy in a little place, a little town, was buying enormous amounts of opioid pills, that clearly wasn't normal. Something was wrong there. And so the law requires that they report this to the Drug Enforcement Administration and they stop the delivery. But this man, Chris Zimmerman's job to do that. Well, when he was told that Florida, which had a big problem with what were known as pill mills, where doctors were illegally prescribing and dispensing pill mills, when Florida started to crack down on those, Zimmerman sent an email to his colleagues, and it said, "Watch out, Georgia and Alabama. There will be a mass exodus of pillbillies heading north." This is the man who's supposed to be kind of looking after the interests, or making sure that that pharmacies don't dispense these drugs, and enforcing the law. There was another email, perhaps this one is more shocking than any of the others, but went around, was emailed widely amongst the executives of this company at AmerisourceBergen, and it contained a mocked-up breakfast cereal box, a Kellogg's box, and it had the word smack for heroin across it, and then across the top were the words OxyContin for kids. And OxyContin was the very powerful opioid painkiller that pretty much kicked off this epidemic.
We're talking with Chris McGreal about pillbillies. This is the contempt that these big pharmaceutical executives, these people are making massive amounts of money, the contempt that they have for the people who 90,000 people, for example, 100 million pills were dropped on them. That's unbelievable. But it's stunning. It's what's equally stunning. Oh, wow. I don't know if it's stunning. Sadly, I'm not a cynic, Chris McGreal, but you know what? You cannot have a lot of regard for people whom you would do this to. You can't. You can't. But I'm just trying to figure out because Mr. Zimmerman he's been on the stand, right?
He has indeed, yes.
And so, I mean, and is he becoming like the fall guy for all of this?
Well, there will be more executives from both AmerisourceBergen and the other two big drug distributors, McKesson and Cardinal Health, who will also be cross-examined. This trial is going to go on for many weeks yet. It's expected to last until June or July, or maybe in August, actually. So we'll be hearing a lot more. But clearly, as it was his job to enforce the law and stop deliveries, and he didn't do that, then, and he admits he didn't stop the deliveries, he will certainly be a focus of the criticism. Whether he'll be the ultimate fall guy, I think, remains to be seen. But what you say about the cynicism, I think it leaks out from these emails, and it will be interesting to see whether there were similar things inside some of these other companies as the trial unfolds.
Drug distributors delivered 1.1 billion opioid painkillers to West Virginia between 2006 and 2014, according to your reporting. Where are we in this trial? I mean, how did this happen? How did they justify raining all of these drugs down on this community?
So what we're seeing is this trial is actually one of a series of federal trials. If we think back a few years to that whole settlement with Big Tobacco, which was quite comprehensive between the cigarette industry and the state, we're seeing something similar underway with the opioid epidemic. There's more than 3,000 lawsuits against the drug makers, the drug distributors, the pharmacy chains at the moment. Many of them are by the states, others are by municipalities and counties, some are by individuals. And so there's a series of federal trials taking place at the moment, which are really kind of bellwether, litmus test trials to see whether, firstly, there's a case to answer, and if so, what's the scale of the damages. And this particular case of Cabell County, which has the city of Huntington in southern West Virginia, is one of those cases. And it's the first to go to trial. There was a similar case in Ohio a couple of years ago, but AmerisourceBergen and the others settled on the doorstep for a few $100 million. But this time they've gone to trial. So for the first time, we're actually seeing the evidence. And it will be interesting. There's no jury, so a judge will be deciding. And this will help set the tone for future settlements, really. And West Virginia was one of the reasons that Cabell County has been chosen, is that West Virginia was and remains the worst hit state of all by the opioid epidemic. Its overdose and death rate was pretty much twice what any other state was.
Well, and it seems to me that the most vulnerable people have been hit. I mean, they're poor people. I mean, these are among the poorest people in the United States. This is certainly when Senator Byrd was their senior senator, Robert Byrd, this was the most heavily subsidized state in the union. Yeah, even more subsidized everybody than Mississippi. This is the biggest, if you will, welfare state. These people work hard. They work hard. They work hard all the time. They just don't make a lot of money. And it seems to me that they were targeted, and they've been treated with such contempt. Chris McGreal, because they are poor, because I hate to say it, it seems like they've been treated as if they don't matter.
Yeah, I mean, it's clearly there's a degree of that. Certainly, they were targeted, as were other communities in Appalachia and other, basically, labouring communities where there was a need, partly because of the physical demand of bodies of mining or logging or fishing, for pain relief. And so they were definitely targeted. But I think one of the things that we've heard in other trials and that we see in this one, it comes out from these emails, is that there was a tendency to blame the victims, the people who became addicted to these drugs, so in essence blamed for their own addiction. So they're derided as pillbillies. They're Jeb who's gone off to Florida to get his fix, you know. And that made it much easier, I think, for these drug companies to go on doing what they were doing, because they simply said nothing to do with us. These people are drug abusers. It's their fault. They got themselves into this. And it helped, I think, that these were marginalized and remain, you know, often marginalized communities in the grand scheme of things. And, you know, you can see this in the fact that, you know, this epidemic was largely invisible to most of America for very many years. And it's only when it starts to spill over into the white middle classes that you finally get it gets the kind of attention that it now has.
Where do you see this trial going? I mean, you said it's not going to be a jury trial. It's going to be judged by a judge.
So the only other trial that we can really compare it to is the state trial in Oklahoma, where Johnson & Johnson, which makes a very powerful opioid, was on trial before a judge, was being sued by the state for its part in pushing opioids. And the judge wrote a scathing decision against Johnson & Johnson, essentially accusing it of being a drug pusher and awarding nearly $500 million to the state. And that was just one case. I would imagine that, you know, the thing that the drug distributors are trying to do, their argument is, listen, it's nothing to do with us. All we do is deliver the drugs. The doctors write the prescriptions, the pharmacists dispense the pills. Why are you blaming us? We're just a delivery boy. The prosecution argument, so to speak, and the DEA's argument is, well, you know, you have a special responsibility. You make all this money from drug distribution, but these are powerful drugs. They're controlled substances, and you have legal responsibilities in delivering them. And you completely washed your hands of those responsibilities. You know, if anybody could do this, why don't we just get FedEx to do it? And I think that given what has come out, the cynicism we just heard about, the cavalier attitude, to be frank, towards their legal responsibilities, I would be surprised if this trial doesn't go against them. And if that happens, you do wonder what that means for some of the other federal trials, whether they'll just decide to try and settle them and negotiate a kind of agreement rather than face more of this.
Chris McGreal, everybody, brilliant reporter with The Guardian. You've got to get his book, American Overdose, The Opioid Tragedy in 3 acts. Well, you know, we're going to continue to watch this trial, and we cannot wait to hear from you, because I think it speaks to something. It speaks to a contempt that we have for the poor, that we have for the least of these, and it's something that cannot stand. Thank you so much for your brilliant reporting, Chris McGreal. Blessings to you.
Thank you, Santita.
Always, always. Everybody, let's talk about the Middle East with John Nichols from The Nation magazine. What do you make of all of this? I want to hear your thoughts. 773-763-WCPT. I think Americans have a lot to say about it. We pay a lot of money. A lot of money. It's foreign aid. Is this how you want it used? Have the door to Santita back. Okay, thank you, Dylan. Just wait until I finish speaking, and then you can bring it up more, okay? I'm looking at it.
Oh, okay. Was it too much or something?
Yes, it was. It was.
Okay.
Okay, because I don't
All right, John Nichols
want him shouting.
I understand. John Nichols is here.
Perfect. Thank you. John Nichols, how are you?
I'm good, dear. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. Thank you.
Oh, good, good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just trying to pull something else back up. So I was just
Don't worry.
talking with,
Don't worry.
thank you so much. I was just talking with Chris McGreal, who writes for The Guardian, and he has a wonderful book, American Overdose, and the opioid tragedy in 3 acts.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah. I mean, when you hear what...
Yeah, it's a really serious issue.
Well,
yeah.
they have the big trial right now in West Virginia.
Yeah.
Sued, and they came across these email in which the big farm executives were calling them pillbillies. You know.
Of course.
Well,
Did you? There's another book out about the Sackler family that is incredibly powerful and revealing.
I just bought it.
Yeah.
I just bought it. It's behind like so many books that I've got to get to, but I did buy that because I said I want to see. Well, I'm clear on the contempt, and because we've racialized classism in America, it's hard for us to get to some of these spaces and places. But the contempt, for these poor white people who are down below ground working every day is just absolutely. I mean, the email, they did something to the Beverly Hillbillies. Jed, who barely kept his habit fed. Oh
my gosh.
Oh no.
But I think that's been, it's a really fascinating reality because it's clear, that one point in the book on the Sacklers, which I was quite impressed with, it talks about how they gave coupons for people to get OxyContin. So they actually gave it to people free. And of course, for a month, right? You could get a month of free Oxy, if I've got this right. And the end result, of course, is that people got addicted.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was the immorality of that is jaw-dropping.
Well, you it's just like when you keep these when you keep the athletes on the field.
Yeah, when they've been injured.
Yeah, you got to keep these guys working because they're the essential workers, right? You got to keep them underground.
It's exactly it.
No matter how sick they are, you gotta keep them going, and it's like, are you serious? But and it lets you know.
That's clearly what's happened. Yeah.
Oh no, keep talking, please, please.
I said that's just clearly what's happened, and this book on the Sacklers and several of the other, and obviously the book you're talking about, they're so revealing because they help us to understand a way in which this intersection of medicine and profit, and of healthcare and profit, isn't just about access to care. It's also about the damage that is done by people who seek to make money by providing care. Absolutely. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
The profiteering becomes such a damaging reality.
Now, are you outside?
I am. Is that okay?
You know what? I'm hearing something
referring
in the background.
to the inside?
No, I think so.
I think it's birds.
I think it's okay.
It is birds. I'm by the side of my house.
No,
yeah.
I
Let me get in a quieter spot.
I thought I was hearing. Yeah, just a little quieter. But it's.
Surely. Of course.
I wish I were outside right now. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, of course. Are you at the studio?
No. I'm at home. Still.
Oh, okay. I figured that was. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I will get over to a quieter spot here.
Well, don't go too
and no
far,
problem at all with that.
Here we are.
No. It's not a burden at all.
We're coming up in like a few seconds.
I'll be at the ready.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. Let us talk about the Middle East. Call me. Text me, 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. If you text me, GWC Injury Lawyers has provided you that opportunity. Thank you, GWC Injury Lawyers. And let's talk about the Middle East. Devastating. More than 1,300 people have been wounded. More than 200 Palestinians have been killed. There's just been this constant tension for decades about Israeli security and Palestinian justice. Can we have both at the same time? Of course we can, but where's the will? America gives, just this year alone, more than $3.8 billion in aid. Now, that's just military aid to Israel. Do we have a say in this, in how these monies are used? Call me, text me at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278, as we're seeing what Common Dreams referred to as reported as a huge loss, Israel's killings of top doctors. And for Israel's portion, they feel insecure, they feel embattled, they feel like I've got to strike because I've got to defend myself. But they're also one of the biggest, the equivalency just isn't there, John Nichols, because this is one of the biggest military powers in the world. They're a mighty, 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 mighty army. And so it's not quite the same thing, but you can certainly understand people and their sense of feeling insecure. And so I'm just trying to find out just where we are with this, because the conversation about the Middle East has shifted down through the years. I know when Reverend Jesse Jackson campaigned on it in 1984, and when he and Mrs. Jackson went to the Middle East in 1979, there was a no-talk policy established by Henry Kissinger and others, in which you did not talk to the Palestinians. You didn't even mention their names. Well, a whole lot has happened since that time, and they did much, 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 much. Indeed, they opened up the conversation because they did something that was really heroic and shocking at the time. John Nichols, you were in those campaigns. They actually campaigned on Israeli security and Palestinian justice. But you are speaking of another congressperson who is doing something really incredible.
Yeah, there actually are a number of members of Congress right now who have stepped up to talk about what's going on in Palestine and Israel at this point in much more blunt and frankly concerned ways than a lot of members of Congress did in the past, and frankly than a lot of political figures did in the past. And there was clearly for a very long time a caution about discussing these issues. At some level, that caution was rooted in ignorance, and frankly, in a failure to kind of dig into the issues more deeply. Now you have a lot of members of Congress who have put an effort into this, who have traveled to the Middle East, who have met with Israelis and with Palestinians, who've talked to a lot of experts, and who've come away with a conclusion. And the conclusion is that, of course, as Congressman Mark Pocan, who I wrote about the other day, says, you condemn Hamas for sending rockets toward Israel, without a doubt. There's no question of that. At the same time, you have to also recognize that the Israeli response is so disproportionate, so overwhelming, and causing so many deaths. And also that it is so indiscriminate, that it is killing not just Hamas commanders or something like that, but men, women, and a lot of children in Gaza. And so you've got a situation where it's necessary to speak out in much bolder and much stronger ways about the need to end this violence. And yeah, you can be critical of both sides, but you can't fall into the trap of a simplistic both-siderism that sees this as, just a simple case of good guys versus bad guys or something like that. It's much more complex, and it has roots and history. And this is something back in '88, if we think back, you were mentioning your father's campaigns, that Jim Zogby, who was a key supporter of your father's presidential campaign and remains a remarkable spokesman on these issues. This is something that Zogby always reminds us, that the history of what has happened here goes back a long, long way. And if you understand it, and if you can speak to it in clear and coherent ways without falling into the simplistic, reaction response to the moment, we might actually get someplace. We might actually get toward a resolution. And that's what we're seeing happen now. A lot of folks are stepping up and saying that the United States has to become a much more even-handed player in the Middle East. And as it seeks peace, to the extent that it does, it has to put pressure on all sides, not just pressure on the Palestinians to accept a circumstance which, frankly, has become so oppressive, so overwhelming, that it is genuinely and consistently described by most of the world as an oppression.
Well, Congressman Pocan has been very, very forthright. He said, we cannot just condemn, you reported, rockets fired by Hamas. What else did he say?
Well, he also said we have to recognize, the roots of the current crisis and the historical roots of what's happened here. And what he talked about was just in recent weeks, for instance, in Israel-Palestine, in East Jerusalem, there's a neighborhood that is a historic Palestinian neighborhood, and the Israeli government and its allies have been seeking to move Palestinians out, force them out of their homes, and ancestral homes, without a doubt. And then there's also been a series of raids on the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is, third holiest place in Islam, and this all occurred during Ramadan, literally as you're in the final days of Ramadan, and you see here actions that have been taken that do provoke, that do cause an immense amount of not just discomfort, but actual kind of horror on the part of Palestinians and, frankly, on the part of a lot of Muslims around the world. And as a result, there has been reaction. It is not shocking that there has been reaction, but much of the U.S. media, and frankly, much of our political class still, has failed to see the whole perspective on this, to understand, what happened initially. And then also, I think we have to recognize that the circumstance in Gaza was unacceptable before any of this happened. Now we have, an incredible violence in Gaza, or the Israeli assault on Gaza. But long before that, Gaza was a place that was too restricted, too closed down, too oppressed. And so you're starting to see a much bigger discussion about the need for the United States, again, to be a more even-handed player. And I have to emphasize, it's important to understand that there are forces on the ground in Israel and in Palestine that really are pushing for peace. I think there's too little coverage in the United States of groups like Peace Now in Israel, which for decades have been advocating for a radical shift in Israeli policy, one that is much more sympathetic toward and respectful toward the Palestinians. And so this is not a simplistic Israel versus Palestine fight. There are many Israelis who see what Israel is doing as, at the least troublesome and in a number of cases just fundamentally wrong. And so as we amplify all these voices, right, we start to get toward a point where we're talking about President Biden. And here's the frustrating thing. President Biden, in his initial reaction, was very, very supportive of Israel and didn't even mention the circumstance of the Palestinians. Now, over the last couple of days, he has evolved that toward a somewhat more even-handed response. But still, there is this deep concern about the U.S. role. And you're hearing a growing number of Democrats and progressives, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Chris Van Hollen from Maryland, and a number of others say that the Biden administration simply isn't doing enough to signal to Israel that this disproportionate response has got to stop, that there has to be a dialing back of this violence. And there is a growing criticism, very blunt criticism from, again, members of Congress. 28 senators yesterday called on the administration to seek a full ceasefire. And that's seeking to get the U.S. to do a lot more. Congresswoman Ilhan Omar from Minnesota, one of the first two Muslim women in Congress, has been very, very blunt in her criticism of the Biden administration for not stepping up and doing more. And Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib from Detroit, the other of the first two Muslim women elected to Congress, has been very blunt in saying that what we're seeing in Gaza, what we're seeing in the circumstance of the Palestinians, is equivalent to apartheid in South Africa. And these are statements that that push the debate to a much more profound place than it's been at up to this point.
Call me, text me, 773-763-WCPT. Let's talk about this, everybody. Jay, what's on your mind today?
Yes. How you doing, Santita?
Great hearing your voice.
Yeah, pleasure to hear you too. I think the point is we can't look to Biden to be fair on this matter. He made a speech in 1986 before the Senate where he made the statement, and this is a quote, "If there wasn't an Israel, we would have to invent one." And that in itself says Israel is nothing but our gangsters in the Middle East to keep everyone else in check. I understand that Israel has to inject in the narrative at every opportunity that this is in defense of Israel, because that was a precept to them getting our weapons, that they could only use them for defense. But what is never mentioned is, what about the Palestinians? Don't they have the right to defend themselves against the actions in Al-Aqsa Mosque, against taking their land and using the American tax system in order to move settlers into Palestine, using a 501c3 corporation that they set up in the United States to move American citizens over to Palestine? Don't they have the right to defend themselves against the actions of Israel?
Well, Jay, I think one of the questions is, how can we stop the shooting, on both sides? I think that's always been...
Well, the shoot...
I don't believe the shoot... No, just hear me out when I say this, because I know Reverend Jackson was invited by Yasser Arafat when he was alive, and before he died, before Reverend could go and do that, they wanted to have a lecture on... and Reverend really wanted to talk to them about nonviolent resistance. Indeed, just before Mandela said, he is glad that his last bombing before he was arrested did not work, because he said, this is going nowhere. And I certainly do believe in self-defense, Jay. I hear you. But the thing is, I heard Reverend Donald Parson from Lagos Baptist Assembly say, even clouds run out of rain. What's happening now is just not working.
Well, I understand what you're saying, but you see, but we also have a situation where Netanyahu is wagging the dog with this.
But what else is happening, Jay? You're not hearing, as John Nichols said, you're not hearing people on the left and even people who in Israel who think that this has gone too far. They can't get heard.
Oh yes. Well, and they're going to even have a less of a possibility of being heard now, because Israel blew up our eyes in Palestine yesterday.
The press.
When they toppled the building that had the AP and Al Jazeera in it. You see, this is, this is all a strategy. This is all a strategy.
Do you think it's
all a strategy.
Do you think it's going to work, Jay?
Well, of course it's going to work if the rest of the world can't get past the United States standing in the way of them doing anything about it.
Stay right there, Jay.
In the UN.
Well, because that becomes the challenge. Because, John, America increasingly is no longer the unchallenged superpower in the world. Most of the world does not agree with this. Okay? And more
So the
and more,
United Nations has certainly been very critical.
well,
Yes.
not me, but individual nations. North Korea, which is sitting
Yes.
on trillions
Yes.
of dollars of unmined wealth, they don't agree with this. I mean, we can just keep on going around countries after countries, even after they normalize relations with Israel. They don't agree with this. And this, I fear that
No.
this increasingly is putting Israel in a very, very bad position, because you can't continue to do this. You're not going to be this strong forever. People, just things shift, John.
Well, I think that the important thing to understand is that what's happened in Israel is that Benjamin Netanyahu, who has been prime minister now for a very long time, is in a huge amount of political trouble. He did not win his last election. In fact, he wasn't able to form a government. And there's been a great deal of instability. The Netanyahu government has not sought to find peace. It has not been an honest player in efforts to achieve any kind of honest negotiation here. And there is this reality that when it gets in trouble, the Netanyahu government so frequently goes to belligerent stances, at least rhetorically, and beyond that. And so we had an op-ed in the New York Times the other day, a very, very good one by Bernie Sanders. And he just simply said, the United States can't be the apologist for Netanyahu anymore. And this is the critical thing. I would argue the United States is doing Israel no favors by backing up Netanyahu and, supporting and sustaining his actions at a time when the Israeli people even have profound doubts about him as a leader. And of course, when countries get into belligerent stances, belligerent circumstances, leaders who are in trouble are often benefited by that. They are in a stronger position because a country, to some extent, unites in a difficult circumstance. But for the United States, the best move at this point is to become, again, a much more honest player in the region and to say that Netanyahu is wrong, that his approach has been wrong, and that there really does need to, that if he continues on this route, the United States, as an ally of Israel, cannot continue to support what Netanyahu is doing. It's that delinking of a bad leader from his people. And obviously, the United States as an outside power can't force that to happen. I mean, the people of Israel are going to decide who their leader is going to be. But the United States can say that if Netanyahu continues to operate in the way that he is, the United States is not going to be, as Sanders suggests, an apologist for this. The United States is going to say no, and that may involve putting a hold on arms sales and in other ways saying, we're not going to back this up because this is so disproportional. You can't have a circumstance where, you're talking about dozens and dozens of children dying. I mean, this is something that the whole world is seeing, as you mentioned, Santita. The whole world is looking at this.
They're pushing back.
It's also...
You know what concerns me also as I bring Renee up, because I want you to at least hear another caller, John.
Yeah.
I mean, we have troops all over the world. All over the world, people resent this. This makes our troops vulnerable too, because people see us as being partners in this, and we're not helping Israel be secure. We're not. This is not this is not playing out the way some people think, and then not to hear these different voices in that country who are saying we need to go another way. Let me bring up Renee. Renee, and I want you to hear what she's got to say and then respond before we go. Renee, what's on your
She dropped.
Oh, Renee dropped. Is Brother Travis still there?
Yes.
Okay, Brother Travis.
I'm here.
Hey, Brother Travis, how are you?
Good morning. Great. First time caller.
So glad. Thank you.
My question is this. As I have looked over the past 20-some years, and I'm a veteran too, and I was stationed in Germany, and at the time they started
camouflaging the military apparatus to get ready to go into Africa and the Middle East. But my question is really this. If the Jews and the Arabs both claim Abraham as their father, do that mean they're cousins? They have a relationship? And then if they have a relationship, why are we standing in the middle of these cousins fighting each other like the Hatfields and the McCoys?
John, do you have an answer to that?
Very good question. And the caller brings up the fact that the Abrahamic religions, Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, do trace back to Abraham. And that all of these religions have intersections of values and ideals and traditions. And the interesting thing is that for these three religions, the Middle East, particularly Jerusalem, are places of great value, places of great connection. And so you have people who are literally battling over ancestral land. And it then goes even into the much more personal level of people battling over ancestral homes. And there is a great deal of history here. The one counsel I would give in this regard is that this area has also suffered over history from a great deal of colonialism and from a great deal of exploitation by foreign countries and by foreign economic powers. And so you end up in a situation where people who you might imagine as cousins have also been put in positions where they're often in conflict with one another, not because of just their own conflicts, but because of outside pressures and outside influences. And so it's a really complex part of the world. There's no question of that, and we shouldn't simplify it. And I think that's really what when I wrote about Congressman Pocan and many of these other folks who've stepped up recently, what's important is you do start to see Americans who are moving beyond the simplistic responses and recognizing the complexity. And that recognition of the complexity demands that the United States' responses to things that are happening in this region also have nuance and have insight and perspective, that they don't simply, go to the traditional spot. And what that does require is an honest discussion, particularly about U.S. military aid to Israel. And that has been raised of late by members of the House and members of the Senate. And it's a real sincere debate that is coming on. We're not already in the thick of it. It's only developing. But the fact of the matter is that ultimately the United States can be a positive player in this region. But it can't be a positive player unless it's an even-handed player that recognizes that when one force is disproportionately impacting another, that's not the way to peace. You're not going to achieve peace through violence. And that goes back to what your father, I think, was preaching when he talked about going to the Middle East, and when he, in fact, did go to the Middle East.
Absolutely. Well, you know what? We're all going to continue to watch. Not just to be prayerful, but I think that we have to find out just very quickly about where our money's going, John Nichols.
That's right.
Because this is also shaping how people are viewing the United States all across the world. 30 seconds, they belong to you.
Well, we are talking right now about $735 million weapons sale to Israel. And there are people in Congress who are saying at this point that should be held up. That we shouldn't, move those weapons to Israel at a point when things are so unstable. And that's going to be the issue of great debate in the coming days. And you will see Mark Pocan and Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren and others stepping up, along with Ilhan Omar, Rashid Tlaib, and others, saying we've got to have a much deeper debate in this country if we're going to be an effective player for peace in the Middle East.
Let's be very clear. The conversation about the Middle East has shifted tremendously over the past 40-odd years. And it's going to continue to shift. And let us hope and pray and move toward justice. All people deserve to be secured, and everyone needs to be treated justly. So we can change the world. We can do that. I love you, everybody. I'll see you tomorrow on the Santita Jackson Show. Love you, John Nichols.
Love you too.
Thank you, John Nichols. I'm still on Facebook. Do you want to say anything? Is there anything else that was left unsaid? This is just so.
There's so much that's left unsaid. I hope that
we'll talk about it.
I thought that was a good discussion. No, I was very, very impressed and pleased with callers who brought in really insightful questions and concerns. And I do think look, I've spent a lot of time in the Middle East, in Israel and Palestine, as well as Jordan and other places throughout the region. And what I can tell you is that this understanding of the Abrahamic religions is a really big deal. I was lucky enough to go to Israel and Palestine at a time when there was a remarkable level of interaction between Christians, Jews, and Muslims who were respectful of one another, protecting of one another, supportive of one another, particularly in the old city of Jerusalem, where people lived so very, very close to each other. And so I know that these peoples can cooperate with one another, that they can find places of interaction, and frankly, even they can find the ground on which to seek peace. But that can't happen if there is a constant resort to military action and a constant resort to disproportional military action. When people feel that they're being treated unjustly, right, they're going to respond. And so for the United States, our role in this is to recognize, I think, to become much more nuanced, to recognize that there is the possibility of peace, that there is the possibility of cooperation, but that you can't get peace without a sense on the part of all peoples in this region that there's also justice. And that's kind of the critical challenge. Again, we're talking about things right now.
And that has been
we've been talking about this now for 30, 40 years. I mean, much longer than that. But I'm just thinking of, the efforts in 1988 at the Democratic Convention to get the Democratic Party to begin to explore these issues. And this is a fascinating thing.
Let me go back to 84. And before that, 1979. Before that, when I met Yasser Arafat at the World Youth Festival in 1978 when I was a kid. And I came back and told my parents, you've got to go. First of all, they sought me out because, they heard Reverend Jackson's daughter was there, and I was, kids, I was not even 15, but I was the youngest member of the delegation. They let me go. Jack Odell, God rest his soul, made the argument that, she's very mature for her age. She understands politics, and I think she'd be a value add to the delegation, and they were very kind, and the delegates were very protective of me too, quite frankly. And it was interesting. Well, you know what? Because I'd been away. I'd been in Denmark for like 2.5, 3 months before that. So I hadn't been in the United States when I got to Cuba for like 3 months, which is very interesting, right? So that was I went to New York for 2 days. I flew back from Denmark for 2 days, and then we drove up to Canada because you couldn't fly out of the United States at that time. And we flew out of Montreal. That having been said, what was interesting, because we took a lot of hits for that. It was a really very challenging and in many respects a really ugly period of my family's life and of our organization's lives, because there was the pushback was so tremendous. But the payoff is that 40 plus years later, now we don't have a no talk policy, and now we're having this discussion, this debate. The concern has always been, John, that this is not making Israel more secure. And it's making Palestinians angrier, and you're turning the world against you. Because if you look at how the world feels about this, America is standing alone. That's not good for anybody. You just heard the veteran who just called in. I mean, can you imagine how they're feeling on the ground about this? I mean, this. I'm just saying it's not.
Yeah,
And you know, when you hear the voice, you've been over there. The voices from the voices for peace. I mean, and even conservatives who say this is not working, this is not right. You can't. They can't get a platform,
Oh, yeah.
John.
That's right. And again, I would argue that we've talked a lot about political players here, and that's important. But there's also a media component to this. U.S. media, we spent the last week talking a lot about Liz Cheney, right?
Yeah.
And that's fine. I respect that, and it's okay to talk about her some. And now they're shifting on to, the next fight, the next thing that Mitch McConnell says, and that's, I cover that stuff for a living. I respect that is part of the discussion, but we are so internally focused. I mean, so focused on a few blocks in Washington, and as a country, because we are such a powerful force in the world, we really need a much more nuanced and savvy coverage of the world, and that means that we need to get a much deeper perspective from our media. And I know that's a lot to ask.
How do you think that would impact us in our debate?
Oh, I think if the U.S. media covered the Middle East in the same way that European media does, and as I'm talking about, Scandinavian countries or France or wherever, or the United Kingdom, if it covered in the exact same way, I think that the people would be far more outraged, and I think there would be a much more nuanced and thoughtful discussion going right up into Congress and right up into the White House.
Before we go, please explain to people who don't, who are not. I mean, because they have marches about this all over Europe all the time. Everybody, just so that you know.
Yeah.
And the debate is far wide. Just can you explain how the Middle East is covered in the United Kingdom, in England, in France, in other parts of just even in the Western countries?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a much more consistent and steady coverage, and that coverage raises up Israeli voices, and it also raises up Palestinian voices. And so I think in many parts of the world, the average news consumer would know a lot more about all of the different players. And I think, as an example, people would know a lot more about the fact that, they just had an Israeli election, that it produced a very unstable result, that Benjamin Netanyahu is not a particularly popular figure, that there's a tremendous level of opposition to him. In fact, that his party doesn't represent a majority of Israelis. His party is a large party. There's no doubt of that. But it's never able to govern without forming complex coalitions, and that in recent days it has not been able to form its coalition. And that at the same time that it's struggling to form a coalition, you see these very provocative moves to move Palestinians out of their homes in East Jerusalem. And if you see all of the politics of this, right, as well as the playouts that you eventually see with, Hamas rockets, an Israeli airstrike, things of that nature, you see all the background of it, then you have much more perspective. And that perspective, I think, leads to a sense that that the Israeli response to what Hamas has done is so disproportionate that, when you're talking about hundreds and hundreds of people being killed, and dozens and dozens of children being killed, this is such an overwhelming and such an indiscriminate response that people see it as A, horrifying, but B, also unjust. And I think that's why you see such a discomfort with the circumstances going on. And again, I would emphasize that a more nuanced coverage of the Middle East brings in Israeli voices of opposition. And that's one of the most important things to understand here. There are members of the Israeli Knesset who are advocates for peace, who are passionate advocates for peace, and who are intensely critical of Netanyahu. Now, that doesn't mean that they say Israel shouldn't defend itself. That doesn't mean that they are, completely opposed to everything Israel does. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that there are a tremendous number of Israelis who recognize that the way that Netanyahu is doing this is A, unfair to the Palestinians, but B, ultimately unfair to Israel itself. And you see a genuine perspective here, a genuine, diversity of opinion. And we need to know that. We need to know that this isn't a simplistic struggle between Israel and Palestine, that within Israel and within Palestine, there are many, many peoples with many, many perspectives. I would even go so far as to say that a tremendous number of Americans, a surprising number perhaps, are unaware that, Palestine is a Muslim and Christian region, right?
Well,
And
remember,
that
that was the Paris of the Middle East before all of this happened. Remember?
certainly
So
up to Beirut, especially.
yeah, so this is where you had Muslim, Jew, and Christian living together. This was, because remember, Israel could have been in Uganda. It could have been in Japan. This is as much.
There were proposals for different locations. Yes.
I mean, this is very political, right? I think that people need to I'm seeing some of the stories, some of the comments in my chat and in my direct message in my inbox. People know that this is very political, and I guess for me, I'm always concerned about everybody on all sides, and I think that we all ought to be.
As you should be. As we all should be.
I think that we all should be, and we all are. But and if no one would ever say that no one has the right to defend themselves, absolutely, you always do. But one of the things that we learned from Dr. King and from Gandhi and from these wise persons is that my father said, "An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth leaves you blind and toothless." Everybody. So what we're doing is not, what's happening here is not working. And as I look at billions of dollars, I'm looking at how people are looking at the United States, because they're not even clear that in the United States, many of us are saying, what is going on here? I mean, as we're struggling with a pandemic, as we're trying to figure out how to get our children back in school, we don't have enough money for these schools. I mean, we got bridges falling. The American Society of Civil Engineers says you get a D- in the United States. So something's got to give, John.
No, there is, and I think that, look, at some fundamental level, what we have to understand is the wisdom of Jimmy Carter. And Jimmy Carter is a very old man now, mid-90s. But if we go back to when he was president of the United States, he came to power, and he determined that the United States was an essential player in the Middle East, whether we liked it or not. And there was many arguments. Folks will say, "Oh, we shouldn't be so involved." But what Carter looked at, and he said, "Well, look, the United States is involved, whether you like it or not. That's the reality. It is." And so he determined that the United States would be a player on the side of peace. And when he began trying for negotiations between Israel and Egypt, look, that there were plenty of people who said that's never going to happen. But he actually made it happen. Yeah. And it took an immense sacrifice on the part of his administration. There are those who will tell you that he sacrificed his presidency in order to seek peace in the region. And we've had presidents since then who have tried. And I'll give credit to George H.W. Bush, Bush the father, who I think tried quite hard to achieve and got pretty close. But at the end of the day, if we understand where Carter was coming from and we understand the importance of what he did, then we have to also recognize that that as he aged and as he watched the region closely, Jimmy Carter has become increasingly concerned about the circumstance of the Palestinians, and has been very outspoken and very blunt about the need.
And he's been attacked for it.
Viciously.
Yeah.
Viciously. But I've interviewed Carter about these issues over the years. And what I can tell you is I've spoken to a few people who are more deeply concerned about the circumstance of Jews and Christians and Muslims in that region, right? This is not some esoteric thing of, oh yeah, I love all these people. He is deeply concerned about the safety, the security, and the future prospects, even the prospect of prosperity for these distinct religious traditions and for the people who follow them. And this man who worked so hard for peace, right, going back into the 1970s, today continues to say that peace is possible, but that it is only possible if you have a much deeper understanding of the region, and B, a commitment to justice for all the peoples in the region that doesn't fall into the narrow traps, the weak spots of thinking that we've always done it this way, we've always been on this side, this is our ally, and we can't change our approach. That's not going to get us to a better spot. And I'll just remind you that what's happening now with Israel and Palestine, particularly as regards Gaza, we went through the same thing 7 or 8 years ago. A similar circumstance of devastating airstrikes, and it went on for a tremendous amount of time. And then it finally came to a halt with a lot of international pressure. And interestingly enough, in Gaza, you had, even with the terrible circumstance of Gaza, you had a period of rebuilding. They put the buildings back together after, all the airstrikes. And now those buildings have been devastated again, right? And just, there are people who say that you will not recognize Gaza after this current, period. And how do you get peace?
200 more people.
Well,
dead. I mean, because the human side of it. And I'm going to give you the final word here before we go. You also have a lot of people who are hurt and resentful. They've had mamas, daddies, sons, daughters, cousins, uncles, best friends, cousins. All of that have been killed. That is, that's a non-starter. Okay, so
it's devastating.
I cannot even imagine. I can't.
And if I can emphasize, this is an important, because you always do, Santita, you're bringing up something that is really vital. I've reported a lot on the ground in Israel and Palestine over the years. And the two things that are really important for Americans to understand, and I think a lot of Americans do, I'm not suggesting that this is some sort of obscure reality, but it's one thing to always keep in mind. These are very, very, very small places. Right? These are not big. This isn't Australia, right? This isn't Canada. These are very, very small spaces
that are densely populated, right? Densely populated.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly, and that's particularly true of Gaza. Yeah. And so, two things extend from that reality. Number one, everybody knows everybody, right? And families have, extended relations, extended connections that may go from village to village or from one place to a city, but there is so much connection, so much awareness that you have to understand it almost as we would understand traumatic things happening in a neighborhood, in neighborhoods of American cities, down to that level. And if we understand it in that way, then what you were just saying, Santita, the notion that a cousin, a sister, a son, a father, a neighbor is killed, I mean, that has profound repercussions that extend, throughout, not just Gaza, but into Israel, where there is a large Israeli Arab population. And the same is true in the Jewish community. And you have Jews and Jewish families that have deep roots and that know one another and that have connections that extend throughout Israel. And if a Hamas rocket lands in Israel, people are very conscious of where it landed, who might have been affected. They may know, someone who is sheltering, right? So everybody, at the end of the day, everybody is experiencing this at a superhuman level. It is very hard to neglect this reality. And ultimately, if it doesn't get resolved, right, if we don't move toward negotiation and peace, then you end up in a situation where people are necessarily going to go into camps, right? They're going to get, so angry with the other side because there isn't some positive outlet for, all of the pain, all of the suffering, all of the, insecurity, all of the frustration. And if you don't have some sort of progression toward peace, right? If you don't have some sort of progression toward at least an honest stability, then you end up in a situation where we'll be on a constant repeat cycle.
Well, we're here.
I know, and we'll be there. We'll be here again. Yeah. You and I will be talking about this 2 years from now or 4 years from now, and that's why I find the debate in the U.S. Why I've been writing a lot about it. Why I find it so encouraging, and even with all of the frustration here, the fact of the matter is people are speaking up. There is more of a dialogue, not a sufficient dialogue, but there is more of a dialogue, and that is one of the things that seems to be different this time.
Oh, yeah.
And it's something that should be nurtured.
Well, it's already shifted, and that's why I think as we go, we have to be very careful because nothing ever stays the same. The constant in life is change. That is what is always true, and you have to be very careful because you never know when the line has been crossed. No one knew that George Floyd would ignite the world. No one knew that Emmett Till would ignite the world. We didn't know that. But everybody's got a tipping point. So don't push people to it. Don't do it. Because one day things will be different and they will never go back to what they were. So I pray for our brothers.
And when you reach
No, please. No.
I was just going, when you reach that tipping point, it is important to understand that you've reached it. Right? It is important to understand that you're there. And I would suggest that right now, when we're looking at what's happening, I think we're there. I think we've reached a point where this is the time to respond.
Well, that's the
and of course, this circles us back. Yeah, it does. And it circles us back to President Biden. And I don't relish his circumstance. It's a very difficult place to be. I understand that. But I understand that he would prefer, I think his administration would have preferred to focus primarily, especially in this early period of his presidency, on domestic policy. I respect that. But the fact is, he has been forced, and Secretary Blinken has been forced to focus on the Middle East. And they should not do so in a half-hearted or ham-handed way. They should do so with a clarity and with a depth of commitment that parallels that of Jimmy Carter at his best, or frankly, that parallels that of George H.W. Bush at his best as regards Israel-Palestine. I had troubles with Bush on other issues in the Middle East, but as regards Israel-Palestine.
We're not talking about those other issues. We're talking about this.
No.
We're talking about this.
And
he was someone who was forward-thinking, and he, as a World War II veteran, as someone who had been head of the CIA, as someone who had a real depth of understanding of world politics and geopolitical life, he understood where this was going if we did not get a grip on this.
That's right. And I will tell you, I mean, not to belabor it, because I know we both have to go, but I'll tell you that when I was in South Africa in the early 90s and would talk to folks there, they would say, George H.W. Bush is the guy who ended the Reagan administration's very wrong-headed approaches to Southern Africa, right?
Absolutely.
And so we can understand that there are Republicans and Democrats who, over time, have gotten this right. And I'm not sure that the Republican Party today is, capable, at least in this moment, of getting things right. They've gone to some pretty extreme places. But the Democratic Party is in charge at this power that it has to shift these discussions is great. And it is, to some extent, it's a question of courage. It's a question of, a willingness to take a chance. And in politics, political players don't often take chances. But taking a chance on trying to move toward peace and reconciliation in the Middle East, as difficult as that is, as challenging as that is, I have to say I agree with Ro Khanna, the congressman from California, who has said, look, it's time to pick up the phone. It's time to start, for Joe Biden to start making those calls and to start signaling that the United States wants this violence to end.
Well, we have to want it to end. Now, there it is. You're not going to vanquish anybody. And I think we all have to grow up in our politics and understand that, as my dear friend, my family friend, Reverend Donald Parson, one of the most profound preachers of this era, even clouds run out of rain. The one constant in life is change. You got to be very clear. You cannot continue to pound people into the ground. You can't continue. This is untenable.
Yeah, that's right.
Even our investment in it is untenable because America increasingly doesn't have the money that we used to have. But we do have need for reinvestment in our own country. Things change, everybody, and you look up and they changed just like that. So, I'll say this, John, as we both go. I want to give you one final word before we go, John.
Simplest thing I'll say is, you can hate someone, you can despise someone. Even if you do, you would not want for them to suffer what we're seeing people suffer at this point, right? So this isn't about who you like or who you dislike. This isn't about who you agree with or who you disagree with. There is violence happening in the world. It's not just happening in Israel, Palestine. It happens in Afghanistan, where schoolgirls are killed. It happens in Myanmar, where demonstrators for democracy have been killed. There's a lot of bad things going on in the world. We can't fix everything in the world. It's not our ability, and it's also not something that we should necessarily assume we have the ability to do. But in the Middle East, because of the long-term U.S. involvement there, we do have some ability to err on the side of peace. And again, no matter where people have lined up in past debates on this, this is a time in which there should be a unified and very strong commitment to seeking peace and reconciliation. Because I don't want to be talking to you next Tuesday about something that's even worse. I mean, this is the time to pull the brake and say, as hard as it is, there has to be an all-in effort to try and stabilize the circumstance, and then try to move immediately toward the sort of negotiations and the recognition of the real challenges on the ground that might get us toward some possibility of peace. And so it's a critical juncture we're at. And I'm so glad that you took the time to talk about it today. Well, I think it's really vital.
I've wanted to. And I'm glad that you and I were able to do this. And we're going to continue to talk about this issue because, indeed, this is our issue. Americans, literally, we invest our monies. We have invested a lot of our religious, political, and cultural capital and lives and intention in this. But the world is invested in this. And, really, I think this particular conflict is emblematic, symbolic of our own conflicts in our homes, our domestic political disputes, the global disputes. I think if we can fix this, and if we intend to fix this, not vanquish one party or another, then we'll get it right. The thing is, we have to grow beyond an I win, you lose politics. I heard Lonnie Guinier say this. We all need to win.
That's right.
We all need to be able to walk away from the table feeling that we got our needs met. You might not have gotten all your wants, but our needs. Can you imagine being pulled out of your home? No, that's not going to work. Can you imagine feeling that I don't know if I'm going to wake up to bombs or rockets? No. But to the things we can't treat people this way. And we cannot allow this. This is unacceptable. And we have to open up the debate and the discussion in this country. And we need to really know what's going on, because the fact that Al Jazeera and AP and these media, that the media were knocked out. So come on, we know that knocks people, that's not going to stop the story from getting out.
No, it is not. And no, the simple reality is that people are aware of what's happening, and they're going to remain aware of what's happening. The question is, and frankly, I put another element onto this. They're also aware of what the U.S. does or does not do, and so the rest of the world is watching.
And we're going to get pushed on that, everybody. We're going to get pushed on that. And Mehdi, you said the conflict has been around for centuries. Not this one, though. This one is new. This one is less than 100 years old. Because in fact, in that part of the world, they had been living. They'd been subject to colonialism, but they didn't have this. And that's why Britain, the United States, and the European powers who came together and helped to create a lot of this, they need to fix it. They need to fix it. This is a post-World War II issue, and it needs to stop, because everybody, Palestinians have been hurt, Jewish people, Israeli people have been hurt, Muslims, Christians, everybody's been hurt. This is unacceptable for everybody. And nobody's going to win until everybody wins. We don't need vanquishment. We need victory, period, for everybody. And we can do that. You can have Palestinian justice, and you can have Israeli security. And when they come together, the world will come together. I believe that. It's got to happen. It's got to happen.
I agree with you.
It's got to happen. Well, I agree with
you.
Reverend.
You said it well, my friend.
No, I got that from Reverend. That didn't come from me.
Well, I understand. But sometimes the best things we say are echoes.
Yeah, well no, you're very sweet. But I just remember him saying that down through the years, and we took hits for it. But you know what? I'm proud of the fact that he was courageous enough to run for president on that. I'm proud of Jimmy Carter, who's been courageous enough to stand on that in his presidency and his post-presidential life. Now we need some other men and women of courage to step forward and get this right. No other person, I don't care who they are, you can shut my eyes, and I don't care if you are Christian, Jewish, Muslim, if you are white, black, brown, yellow, or red, because everybody's over there. I don't want anyone else to die. I don't want anyone else to lose their home. Enough. Study war no more. That's where I am. I love you, everybody. I love you, John. I'm going to probably call you before the week is out, because this is really becoming quite the story. Whew.
Honored to join you in this discussion.
Always. Love
you so much. Such a pleasure.
Much. Always.
Even as painful as it can be, it's a pleasure to be with you.
It's always, well, it's a pleasure to be with you always. And of course, John is here every Tuesday, 7:30 Central Standard Time on the Santita Jackson Show. And of course, check him out in The Nation magazine. We love you, John. Thank you so much for all your work.
Take care. Be strong.
You too. You too. Love you, Carol. Love you, Andre. Love you, Stanley, Mehdi, everybody. Love you, love you, love you. D-Ray, God bless you. Thank you, Dylan.